A hidden sight. A revealed truth. One woman's journey from blindness to betrayal. Imagine regaining your vision after 2 decades of blindness, expecting it to stitch your life back together, only to uncover a truth so shattering you'd rather return to the darkness. That's what happened to Sarah Thompson. She believed seeing again would resurrect her world. Instead, it tore her reality to pieces. Sarah's story was about to twist in a way no one could have predicted. At 32, Sarah was a force, her ambitions as vast as a city skyline. Then, in a single night, her world plunged into shadow. No accident, no warning, just an endless void. Doctors labeled it Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy. Her eyes appeared untouched, perfect even, but they were severed from sight. She never had the chance to bid farewell to the vibrant hues of her life. Sarah wasn't alone, though. Her husband, Michael Carter, stayed by her side. A soft-spoken man with a disarming smile. He became her anchor. He handled the bills, chauffeured her to appointments, and patiently taught her to navigate their home by memory. Friends called her blessed to have him. For years, she nodded along, grateful. But as time wore on, subtle fissures began to surface. Small, fleeting details, easy to dismiss at first. A trace of lavender lingering on a jacket she'd never worn. A coffee mug she hadn't touched, left in the sink. A chair shifted just slightly from its usual spot. The guest room door, once always ajar, now sealed shut. A faucet dripping in the dead of night, though she hadn't been near it. She brought it up with Michael. He always had a ready explanation. "You probably brushed against the chair, babe," he'd say. "A friend dropped by last week. No big deal." His tone was too polished, too effortless. He made her feel like her mind was playing tricks. So she stopped asking. A silence settled in, not just the absence of sight, but the deeper quiet of doubting whether she deserved the truth. Then one morning, her phone hummed to life. A calm, measured voice spoke. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Dr. Anna Blake from the Clear Horizon Center. We're conducting a gene therapy trial that could potentially restore your vision." Sarah's heart stuttered. Her fingers tightened around the phone, trembling with disbelief. She thought it might be a cruel error. But Dr. Blake's voice pressed on, steady and sure. "Your case is in our records. Would you consider coming in for an evaluation?" Hope hadn't knocked in years, not since the early treatments fizzled out. Not since Michael urged her to let go. "Focus on living, Sarah. Chasing miracles will only break your heart." But this call bypassed him entirely. It was hers alone. "I'll be there," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She kept it from him. The next day, she clutched her cane and told Michael she had a routine doctor's visit. "Want me to drive?" he asked, keys already in hand. "No, I booked a rideshare," she replied, mustering a faint smile. At the center, the process was understated. A series of injections over weeks, with no grand assurances. Sarah returned faithfully. She stayed silent, even as the world began to stir awake before her eyes. At first, it was merely a soft shimmer, like dawn breaking through a long night. Then, gradually, the blur coalesced into distinct forms, edges sharpening into meaning. Finally, the world bloomed into a cascade of colors, vivid and overwhelming, as if life itself had been repainted. One morning, alone in her bathroom, Sarah faced her reflection. 20 years without a glimpse of herself. And there she stood, older, etched by time, but unmistakably her. Tears fell, not solely from joy. The light carried a weight, a piercing clarity that cut deeper than she'd expected. She didn't tell Michael. She continued the charade. She let him lead her to the kitchen table. Asked where the jam was, though its bright label was clear as day. Pretended to stumble over the rug under his watchful gaze. Sarah was crafting a plan. Their 30th anniversary loomed, a milestone she envisioned as a grand reveal. A quiet dinner, candles flickering, music weaving through the air. She'd take his hand, look into his eyes, and say, "Michael, I can see you. I saved this moment for us." That was her hope, her fragile dream. But light doesn't shield the raw edges of truth. Her dream fractured the very next morning. Michael left for work, his car humming out of the driveway. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her newfound vision drinking in every detail. She waited until the sound of his engine faded. Then she began. She started with the dishwasher. 2 coffee mugs rested inside. One bore a faint smudge of pink lipstick, a shade she hadn't worn in years. In the laundry basket, buried beneath Michael's neatly folded shirts, she found a silk scarf, floral, delicate, utterly foreign. The guest bathroom revealed more, 2 toothbrushes in the holder, each a different brand. On the shower shelf, nestled beside Michael's familiar shampoo, sat another bottle, sweet, luxurious, not hers. Then, like a ghost from the past, that scent returned, lavender. Years ago, she'd caught it, faint and fleeting, and dismissed it as her imagination. Now it was undeniable. Behind a stack of towels, she found the perfume bottle, deliberately concealed. The truth wasn't hiding. It stood bold and unapologetic, waiting for her to see. She approached the guest room door. It was locked, a stark contrast to its once inviting openness. In the hallway, the camera Michael had installed, for her safety, hung limp. Its plug pulled from the wall. She hadn't touched it. Her pulse quickened, but fear didn't take hold. What she'd sensed in the dark now stood illuminated, in vivid colors, tangible shapes, and haunting scents. She held off confronting him. Not yet. The next day, she waited for Michael to leave again. Then she entered his home office, a space he'd always guarded with polite but firm boundaries. A locked drawer yielded with a gentle tug. Inside lay a plain envelope, unassuming yet heavy with secrets. She opened it. A photograph slipped into her hand. Michael stood on a sunlit beach, shirtless, his grin wide and carefree. A younger woman clung to him, her arm looped around his waist, their ease speaking of intimacy without guilt. On the back, in his familiar scrawl, Bahamas, June 10th, best trip ever. Sarah's stomach lurched. June 10th, their anniversary. She could still feel that night. The green dress she'd ironed with care. The candle she'd lit, its flame dancing in the dark. The pasta she'd made, cooling untouched as she waited. Blind, but clinging to hope. Michael never came home. He'd called that morning, his voice casual. "Work trip, something last minute, I'll make it up to you, babe." She'd trusted him. But while she sat alone, he was in the Bahamas. With her. Not just a lie. Not just infidelity. He'd forsaken her on the day they'd promised forever. Sarah didn't cry. She didn't scream. She slid the photo back into the envelope. Not to conceal it, but to arm herself. She wasn't merely proving she could see. She was proving she'd seen enough. That night, Michael slept beside her, oblivious. Sarah lay awake, her eyes tracing the ceiling's shadows. For the first time in 2 decades, her vision was unclouded, both literally and otherwise. The photograph had shattered something fragile inside her. But it also kindled a quiet resolve. She needed to uncover the full scope of his betrayal. Before dawn, while his snores filled the room, she slipped back to his office. She opened his laptop, her fingers hesitating over the keys. He'd always insisted technology was too daunting for her. But she knew his passwords, had always known, though she'd played ignorant. The banking app loaded, and her breath caught in her throat. 4 loans, all in her name. Signatures scrawled, but not by her hand, forged. The money vanished. A checking account, previously unknown, registered solely to Michael. Massive cash withdrawals. Untraceable payments. Thousands shuffled over 7 years. Then the credit cards, opened with her information, their balances maxed out. Payments made just enough to avoid suspicion, never to clear the debt. He hadn't just betrayed her trust. He'd dismantled her financial future. Then came the deepest wound. In an archived email folder, buried beneath years of mundane correspondence, she found it. A message from 6 years ago, sent by a medical research group. An invitation to a clinical trial, a chance to restore her sight. Much like the one she was now pursuing. The words were unmistakable. "We'd like to enroll Sarah Thompson in our study." She'd never seen it. Because Michael had responded, using their shared email. "Thank you, but Sarah's not interested. Please remove her from the trial list." Signed with her name. But she hadn't written a word. He had. He'd seen her chance at light and snuffed it out. He'd chosen to keep her blind, safeguarding his web of lies, his control, his other life. He'd stolen her agency, her choice. Sarah closed the laptop, her movements deliberate. She leaned back, the weight of his betrayal settling like stone. This wasn't just an affair, nor mere financial deceit. It was a calculated tapestry of deception, woven over years and cloaked in false devotion. She saw the man she'd loved for 30 years, and he was a stranger. The next day, she moved through the house as if nothing had changed. She kept her steps slow, deliberate. Asked Michael to guide her to the couch. Fumbled for the sugar jar, though its label was clear. He kissed her cheek, oblivious. "Big night's coming," he said, his grin easy. She forced a thin smile. "Can't wait." She knew it was their last. By evening, she'd set the table with care. Fine china, candles casting a warm glow, napkins folded just so. It looked like a scene from a dream, romantic, intimate. But she knew the truth. Michael didn't belong in this moment. He walked in, flowers in one hand, a bottle of wine in the other. "Happy anniversary," he said, his smile bright and untroubled. Sarah sat tall, her posture unyielding. Before her lay the envelope, inside. The photograph, the bank records, the falsified email response. She said nothing. He leaned in for a kiss. Their eyes met. Hers were unwavering, piercing, alive with knowing. Michael froze, his breath catching. "Sarah," he whispered, voice faltering. "What's this?" She exhaled, slow and measured. "You thought I'd stay blind forever. But I see now, Michael, I see everything." His smile collapsed, his face drained of color. He stared at the papers, the evidence he believed was safely hidden. He stumbled over words, grasping. "Sarah, let me explain." "You didn't just cheat," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You stole my choices. You forged my name. You buried every opportunity I might have had. You kept me in darkness so you could live your lies undisturbed." He sank into the chair across from her, panic flooding his features. "Her name's Emily," he mumbled, barely audible. "It meant nothing." "You didn't have to tell me," Sarah said, her tone flat, unyielding. "You thought I'd never find out." The candles flickered, their light exposing the vast distance that had grown between them over decades. He'd built his life on her blindness, banking on her ignorance. Now she saw him, every facet, every flaw. Michael unraveled before her eyes. The flowers lay untouched, still wrapped in cellophane. The wine bottle trembled in his hand, unopened, forgotten. He couldn't bring himself to pour. He stared at her, as if she were a ghost, or perhaps his judge. "Sarah, I didn't mean for this," he said, voice cracking. "I was scared. Your blindness, I didn't know how to deal with it. I thought I was protecting you." "You weren't protecting me," she shot back, her words precise and unsparing. "You were shielding yourself from guilt, from responsibility. You turned me into your burden, not your partner." He reached for her hand, desperate. "We can fix this. I'll pay it all back. I'll end it with her. Don't leave me." Sarah drew a folder from her bag and placed it on the table. Divorce papers. A letter addressed to a fraud investigator. A form revoking his power of attorney. Michael's face went ashen, his breath shallow. "You're serious?" he choked out. "I've spoken to a lawyer," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "The banks are aware of the fraud. And Emily? She's yours now. You'll need someone to help you pack." He sat motionless, stunned, as if the woman he'd known had vanished. But she hadn't vanished. She was right here, more present than ever. Sarah stood, pushing her chair in with deliberate care. She gathered her belongings, her hands steady. "Keep the house," she said, her tone final. "Keep the furniture. Keep your secrets." "I'm keeping myself." Michael didn't stir. He didn't speak. He didn't follow. For the first time in 20 years, Sarah walked to the front door alone. No cane. No guiding hand. She turned the knob herself and stepped into the night. Not as the blind woman who needed saving, but as the woman who had saved herself. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. No tears stained her face. No backward glance tethered her to the past. Only the sound of her shoes against the pavement, steady and sure, carrying her forward. For the first time in 2 decades, Sarah Thompson beheld the world in all its raw, unfiltered beauty. And it was hers to claim. The weeks that followed were grueling. Unraveling Michael's financial chaos demanded hours of paperwork, endless calls, and court appearances. People who once sang his praises now offered pity or skeptical glances. But Sarah didn't shrink under their gaze. She met each challenge head-on, her resolve unshaken, her spirit fierce. Michael faced an investigation, his accounts frozen. The loans he'd forged in her name were nullified. Emily vanished, leaving behind only the faint trace of her lavender perfume and a name Sarah no longer cared to remember. But Sarah didn't pause to dwell. She channeled her energy into something greater. She founded a nonprofit, Vision Forward, a sanctuary for women with disabilities who'd been wounded by those they trusted most. She stepped onto stages, her voice steady as she shared her story, not as a victim, but as a survivor, whole and unbroken. "I lost my sight," she told a rapt audience, "but never my worth, never my voice. Now, with eyes open, I see others who've been told to be grateful for lies. I say, no more." Her words resonated. Women reached out, their letters pouring in from across the country. Some wept as they wrote. Others cheered her on. All felt seen, perhaps for the first time. Sarah began to live, not merely survive within the confines of a house built on deception, but thrive in a world she'd reclaimed as her own. She was no longer Michael's wife. She was Sarah Thompson, complete, clear-eyed, unstoppable. Sarah once believed losing her sight was her greatest trial. She was mistaken. The true agony was discovering that the man guiding her through the darkness had been weaving a trap all along. He'd stolen choices she couldn't contest, freedoms she couldn't perceive. When light returned, it brought the truth, unvarnished, painful, undeniable. But Sarah didn't crumble. She reclaimed her voice, her strength, her life. Sometimes, it's not the blindness that breaks you. It's the betrayal you were never meant to witness. Could you forgive someone who kept you in the dark, not just with words, but by stealing your very sight? Or would you walk away? Like Sarah, head held high, eyes wide open to the world?